Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking the time today to join us to learn how to fast-track great ideas and make them stick. This is the third and final webinar in our three-part webinar series brought to you by Allegra Marketing Print Mail. If you missed our last webinar about unlocking the secrets to an unbeatable customer experience, you can view that recording at allegrasecrets.com. My name is Tiffany Moss with Allegra, and I'm really happy to be here with you today. Before we get started, there's just a few housekeeping things I'd like to cover. I'd like to encourage you to interact with us throughout the session by using the chat box on your screen to submit questions and sharing your thoughts on Twitter using the hashtag AllegraIdeas. We will pause for questions a couple times throughout the session, as well as save some time for additional questions at the end. And as always, this session is being recorded and will be sent to you via email no later than next week. We're so excited about today's webinar because I think we can all admit we've all been envious at some point or another of someone that seems to effortlessly come up with great ideas on the spur of the moment. And for some of us, we may be so bogged down in our daily work that we don't even have the time to come up with new ideas, let alone actually implement them. And that's really why Allegra is sponsoring this webinar today. And the timing, we hope, is perfect as you work on your annual marketing plan and budget. We understand you have a lot on your plate, and it can be challenging to pitch an idea, gain buy-in from those around you, and then execute on that idea. But you have to start with the end goal in mind. And before you start pitching ideas, you have to determine what your objectives are. Is your end goal to create a strong brand, protect and grow your existing customers, or target and acquire new customers? So we're going to spend this next hour talking about how to draw on your past experiences to inspire your next big success. We'll share some tips and tricks on how to generate more and better ideas faster than ever, and walk through the proven formula to transform any audience from skeptics to believers. Lastly, we'll share why having a partner like Allegra can help you meet your objectives and can be a game changer in your idea generation and strategic planning. So to get started, I'd like to introduce our expert for today's discussion, Carla Johnson. Carla is a world-renowned speaker, author, and storyteller, and her work with the Fortune 500 brands has served as a foundation for the latest ever 7 books. Experiences, the 7th era of marketing, sets a powerful new way for marketing to create value for businesses. Named one of the top 10 influencers in business-to-business marketing, and one of the top 50 in women in marketing, Carla regularly challenges conventional thinking, and she's here to help all of us fast-track our great ideas and make them stick. So with that, I'd like to welcome Carla.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's so great to be here. And hello, everyone, wherever you are. Maybe it's your morning coffee break, maybe it's your lunch, maybe you're taking some time this afternoon to be a part of this webinar. And you can see this idea of being able to come up with great ideas. So it's like there's 3 parts of this. There's the ability to come up with a great idea to start with. There's ability to do it really fast. Because let's face it, when we have these kind of deadlines or just out of nowhere requests for great ideas, there always seem to be at a moment's notice. And then getting these ideas that will actually stick and turn into something is really something that people pay attention to this time of year, because the year's starting to wind down. And like Tiffany said, you know, it's almost over. And in fact, I looked at the calendar today and there's only 67 days left in 2018. Oh, and I know for me, that makes me feel a tremendous amount of pressure to finish this year really strong and really do an amazing job of how I'm going to show up as a brand in next year. And 2019 is just around the corner. And we're starting to make these plans for projects and budgets, and people have expectations of how we're going to outdo this year, next year. And that's why I was so excited when Tiffany and the Allegra team proposed this idea for the webinar about how to make these ideas, how to fast track these great ideas and really make them stick. Because let's face it, when you come to your boss and you want to do something new and you say, I have this amazing idea for an Instagram campaign for a medical audience, your boss says, are you kidding me? Doctors are on social media. They read white papers. I need you to go write more white papers. Or maybe you work at a nonprofit and you want to do something really unusual with a big odd-shaped print piece that looks like something from the Transformer movie. You know, it turns into all these different shapes and things that would really capture people's attention. And your boss says, are you nuts? That's not what matters to donors. Go write another donor solicitation letter. Or maybe you look at the education market. Maybe that's where you work. And you have this amazing idea for a series of really interesting direct mail pieces that you know is going to capture their attention. And your boss says, that's not what school administrators care about. What I need you to do is to go write more brochures about our educational software, because they really just want to know about the features and the benefits of the software. So it's really interesting what we see happen here, because when you start your career and you're fresh out of college, you have a million ideas. Like everything around you just helps the ideas come and your creativity is flowing. And you're in your boss's office every single day pitching new ideas. Here, if we look at how many ideas that you pitch over time, you've got them coming just right and left. You know that it's a matter of statistics. It's like being up at bat. The more you're up at bat and the more you swing, the more likely that you're going to get a really big home run. So that's how you are when you're 22 and you're fresh and you're so idealistic. And then maybe a couple of years into your career, you start to see, okay, maybe I shouldn't share everything as soon as it comes into my head. Maybe I need to flesh these out a little bit. So maybe it tapers down a little bit over time. But then you get to when you're 32 and you start to look at this pace of ideas and your willingness to put things forward. And then you see your pitch frequency has come down quite a bit. And maybe instead of 5 times a day or even 5 times a week, you're pitching a new idea maybe once every 6 months. And before you put it out there for people to give you feedback on, you do some things to kind of test the waters. Maybe there's a YouTube video or something else that you got in your inbox, your physical inbox, that really caught your attention, and you show it to somebody else and you say, hey, what do you think about this? And they go, it's all right, but I don't really like the gloss on this paper, or, I think the fold isn't quite right. And you say, yeah, I was kind of thinking that same thing. So you take the risk out before you really share your good idea. Now you move into being 42. And by the time you're 42, you're only trying to get a good idea out there maybe once every 2 years. And even the riskiness of that good idea isn't very big, because by the time you're 42, you've got a lot invested in your career. You have maybe a mortgage, maybe you have kids to put through college, but most of all, you have heard no a jillion times. And you're thinking, this isn't something that's worth, sticking my head out for. And you look at these 32-year-olds and these 22-year-olds and you think, yeah, I was you once. I remember what that used to be like. You just wait. I'll give you 10, 20 years. You'll be just like me. But the interesting thing is about this is that it's not that we have bad ideas, that's what's happening and that's why we're hearing no. It's just that we haven't learned how to pitch these ideas. Because whatever we go through college for, there's no set curriculum about how to pitch an idea and how to get people to say yes and support it. And that's a huge part of getting great ideas and fast tracking them, because the ability to get somebody to support your idea is such a key part of getting ideas to stick. So that's what I want to make sure we talk about, because when we go in to pitch a great idea, what's everybody's first request when you say, hey, I have an idea, and you share it a little bit? The first thing they say is, show me the, and wherever you are, you can yell it real loud, it's okay. They always say, show me the numbers. They want proof first. But there's a very interesting thing that happens when we start with numbers. But this is our tendency, because we want to prove first that our idea is a great idea. So here's what happens in the brain when you start out by trying to prove first that your idea is a great idea. So you have your left side of the brain, which is your analytical, logical side. And then you see here your right, colorful, creative side of the brain there. So when we start out by pitching an idea, and we start out by doing what people ask us to do, show them the numbers first, an interesting thing happens chemically in our brain. And that's that it activates cortisol. And if you haven't heard of cortisol, cortisol is that chemical that activates in our body when we have that fight or flight tendency. Genetically, historically, even from early caveman ages, that's what happened. If a tiger was chasing you, cortisol activated, and that made your adrenaline go, and you could hopefully outrun that tiger. You know, it's that really stressful, because when we talk about numbers first, the first thing that happens in people's brains is they start to decide, do I agree with this or do I not? And you put them into judgment mode. Now, what we want to do when we have these great ideas is that we want to bring them along and move them into a different place and what happens in their brain. So when we pitch ideas, what we want to do is start with a story, because a story activates the oxytocin chemical in our brain. And I call oxytocin like the carb chemical. It's that yum, warm, feel good, we feel loved, we feel amazing kind of chemical. It's what gamers understand, and that's why if you've ever played Candy Crush, that's why you get these little drips of success, because it's those little drops of oxytocin and dopamine that make you feel good, that make you want to keep playing the game. So people really understand this who are in the gaming industry. Now, it's really interesting when we look at this, because when we have great ideas, the first thing that we've been trained to do is to start with the proof, you know, show me the numbers. But actually what we want to do is we want to flip this. Instead of starting with the proof, we want to start with the plot. What's the story of the great idea that we have? How did we come up with it? And then we end with the proof, because by then we've created a really strong, interesting, supportive emotional connection with people about the idea that makes them much more likely to support it, or at least instead of judging our evidence, they'll be a part of iterating it, involving it, making the idea more successful. Now, I know I've covered a lot just to start with, so I thought I'd take just a quick break here, Tiffany, and see if we have any questions so far.
That's great. Yeah, we actually have had one come in so far. And this person said, so my boss does always ask me to start with the numbers like you had said, but how do I even get them to listen before I approach the numbers?
You know, and I always love when people ask that question, and I'm going to get to it, but it's one of the last slides, because, you know, I have a story about how you get to that. So it's a critical question that really makes the difference in the success of a good idea. But first, we're going to talk about how to come up with those good ideas before we talk about how to prove them without starting with the numbers. Is there any other questions?
Nope, that was it for right now.
Excellent. Okay. So when we look at how you come up with good ideas, here's what most people do. Okay, so here's Amazon. They created this oversized box and had it delivered just to get the attention. Now, you couldn't say in your company, hey, let's do what Amazon did. Or you look at what Arby's did. They have this campaign where they put a sign, a ginormous sign, out in a field in the middle of Nebraska, which I heard their latest campaign, marketing campaign, Nebraska's campaign, is honestly, it's not for everyone. So now you won't even see the Arby's ad, but they also, Arby's took this to the other extreme and they put an ad on a grain of rice. So you look at that, and then you look at a company like Domino's that said, you know what, we know people are paying for pizza, so we want to make sure that we can get there fast, and we want to make sure that our pizzas get there safely, and so we are actually going to create a road repair campaign. So Domino's pizzas paid to have potholes in roads fixed. And you can see their stamp here. Oh, yes, we did. But now what happens within organizations is that they look at the things that companies like Amazon and Arby's and Domino's have done, and they say, hey, that's really interesting. Look at what they've done over there. And they take that as the foundation for the idea they generate, and then they pitch it. And what happens when you do this is that people start to say, what, this would never work. And you say, yeah, it would. Here, I've got the proof for you. And you get into that cycle of people judging the numbers rather than really giving you time to help understand, is this a good idea or not? What we see with this process, when you observe something another brand has done and you use that as what you generate for an idea and pitch, it's really just a copy and a paced approach. So now you're probably asking yourself, okay, I know how to make them stick, but how do I actually come up with the great ideas, like Tiffany was saying? So interestingly, what you actually have to do to come up with the great ideas relates specifically to this 3-step process, but I'll come back to that in a minute. First, what I want to do is introduce you to Laura Nix Farquhar, and she works at the Anne Arundel Medical Center in Annapolis, Maryland. And every day when Lauren goes to work, she was trying to figure out, how do you get men to understand how important their health is, and to get them and to get the people around them to take action, to really change their behavior. And then one day, it was in November one year, and she saw something about the Movember campaign. And if you haven't heard of it, the Movember Foundation was started by a group of people in Sydney, Australia, because they wanted to talk about changing the face of men's health. They could see a major health crisis for men that wasn't being talked about, and they believed that men were dying too young. So they created this charity to take on some of the biggest health issues, such as prostate cancer and testicular cancer and mental health and suicide. So for example, they found that 1 in 41 men die of prostate cancer every year. And when it comes to suicide, women have more suicidal thoughts, but it's the men who actually commit suicide more often than women. Now, this information and this story of how the Movember Foundation was started really caught Lauren's attention, because of how the medical center was looking to bring attention to their own men's health program. So what she did is she looked at the success and why this worked for the Movember Foundation, and they launched the Movember Stashie contest for the medical center. And they challenged people, whether you had a real mustache or a fake mustache, to start sharing their pictures on social media. And then they gave them an incentive on top of that. They offered people a chance to win a $50 gift card every week. Now, what they saw is that this started to drive greater attention to their men's health program. And for many people, they started to say, you know, I didn't even think of men's health as a different kind of specialty. We hear a lot in general about specialists for women's health or for children, pediatric care, but not specifically for men. So that right there was the first big thing that they realized, was brand awareness for their men's health program. Now, the next thing that they did was they created this Mustachie contest, and people absolutely loved this. And I don't know if any of you have gone to a party and they'll have the little stick-on mustaches or the mustaches on a stick. But I know I have, and I love them. And the first thing I want to do is take a selfie. And that's exactly what people wanted to do when they heard about this contest. And so you see, they tell them right here, here's your $50 gift card for Dollar Shave Club awarded each week, you know, because you probably need to keep that mustache nice and tidy. So take a Stashie. A Stashie is a selfie with a mustache, real or fake. Post your picture with this hashtag on Facebook and keep checking in weekly. Now, they had people from all ages, all professions, and all levels of mustache growing abilities submit their pictures to be on the Facebook page, and also a chance to win this weekly prize. Now, here you see a picture of a firefighter. This is George, and when George submitted his entry, he shared a little bit about his story and why bringing attention to men's health mattered so much to him. Because he saw that people who were in the firefighting profession, they would get cancer because of all of the carcinogens that they were exposed to. And he wanted to help raise this awareness. And he actually had a friend, Captain Hill, who he dedicated his entry to because it had a personal meaning to him. And now you see this picture of Mike, and I don't know if this is Mike's son or his grandson, but Mike won the second week of the contest. And Lauren and her team did a fabulous job of keeping the campaign fun and keeping people engaged and really raising this awareness of men's health throughout the month of November. Now, she was able to do this because she was really good about observing the world around her. So this is the first thing you need to be able to do as you start to look at how do you come up with a great idea. Because when you observe the world around you, it starts to give meaning to all this minutia that we go through every day. And we start to look at the world with a really different lens than we've had before. So that's the first step with coming up with a great idea, is that you have to take time to observe the world around you, just like Lauren did. Now, the second person I want to tell you about is Tammy Conrad-Salvo. And Tammy works for Purdue University, and she's the associate director of the online writing lab, nicknamed the OWL. And so this was a really interesting situation. Tammy's worked for the lab. It's been around almost 25 years, and she's been a part of it from the very early stages. And one of the things that she saw when they launched, for the reason to launch the lab, is that they saw the challenge that these students had in trying to write their papers, and the struggle that they had, and what an impact their ability to write or to know how to write made in the success of these students. Especially if you look at, some students take 2 years to go through college, some 4 years, some 6 or even longer if you really get into an academic career that's about being a teacher, or you get a PhD or something like that. And one of the biggest challenges that they had was around writing papers. And I know I've written a lot of books in my career. I've written a lot of papers. This is still something that I find hard for me. So you think about somebody coming out of high school and going into college and having to write all of these papers. And then you have to start to understand the writing style requirements. Is it MLA? Is it Chicago? Is it Associated Press? And I don't know about you, but those are the kind of things that brings back nightmares for me from college. All those little things that really made a big impact on your grade. Now, Tammy said, knowing this, what if we could help take away one of the biggest challenges to student success? What if we really focused on giving them the tools that they need to become really great writers? So that's how they came to launch the online writing lab, because the one they had in person, they saw that, many college students, they wait till the middle of the night to start working on papers. The staff didn't want to staff in-person support to match the students' work hours. So that's how they really came in to launch the writing lab. And you look at some of the resources that they're able to provide. So you see right here, symptoms and cures for writer's block. Summary, help in overcoming writer's block, and a short series of exercises to get you writing. So what they did is they helped the writers, the students, understand what their problem really was. And yes, here's a symptom, here's how you can cure it. Here's a symptom, here's how you can cure it. So a really great thing about it is that it helps students understand that what they were facing, young and new in their academic career, are really things that seasoned academics and seasoned writers still experience. So they looked at this and they helped students kind of start to bond with each other and really have an emotional bond with the university. But an interesting thing started to happen is that it wasn't just the Purdue University students who found it helpful. They saw that they could grow a tremendous audience. So they expanded over into YouTube channels. And you can see here they have almost 18,000 subscribers on YouTube. Now, something really interesting started to happen as they broadened their reach and expanded their audience, is that some of their competitors started to talk about their online writing lab. So here you can see it's the University of Portland website. But when they talk about resources for students, where do they point them to? The Purdue Online Writing Lab. Now, isn't that interesting? So what they were able to do is expand the audience for Purdue University through this simple resource that they observed would be really helpful for students. So now not only are Purdue University students using it, but students from other universities. Parents are using it to help their high school students. High school students are using it. So now you have a tremendously large community of people who are looking to Purdue University for, in this case, the writing lab for help. But once they are aware of Purdue University, then they start to say, hey, wait, I think we got a brochure from them in the mail the other day. I better take a second look at them. Or maybe they say, we should go visit them. You know, our son or our daughter is getting close to graduating from high school. Maybe it's their junior year. We should go take a trip to see Purdue University. So it's amazing. One of the reasons that Purdue University succeeds is because they go beyond just shooting promotional videos about great campuses and classes, and beyond just pictures of these that come in on brochures. This is how different stakeholders that are in your target audience to become customers, this is how you can move them along the sales funnel, and how you can target those audiences using a whole range of people who have influence on the people making decision. And this is how you become aware of a brand and really be there at the time when serious customers are starting to make a real decision. So that's what Purdue University ended up realizing out of this. Now, it worked so well because Tammy did the second step of creating really great ideas, is that she took what she had observed and she distilled it into something that had a broader meaning. She understood that this applied to a much bigger audience than just the small one she started to serve. And that is how you give context to all the minutia that we observe around us, because it helps us understand patterns, and our brains naturally look for patterns. So that's your second step, is that you need to take what you've observed and you need to distill it. Look for patterns, because that's what gives context to everything that you look at. Now, our third example is, it's actually a nonprofit company. It's called WaterAid, and this is Elena. And she works for another organization now, but for many years, she worked in media relations and community engagement at WaterAid. And this is an example of really looking at something that the mainstream media or mainstream culture really finds interesting and captures their attention. So every day when Elena went to work, she really had a tough job in her hand, because what WaterAid does is help provide toilets and it's sometimes clean water to areas of the world that really, really struggle. And so she would show up every day at work and try to help people understand that there's 2.3 billion people in the world who don't even have a decent toilet. And without that, what was happening is that without the basic sanitation, people were getting sick. And they could see that there were over 300,000 people every single year who were dying, but they were really preventable deaths. And when she looked into some of these numbers and she looked at the traction that they were getting with the information that they were sharing, she could see it just was never what they had hoped it would be. And part of it was because this, to be honest, is a really sad and depressing topic, and people just didn't want to hear about it. Or people would say, that's so far away with me. That doesn't have anything to do with me. So even though they were trying to help people donate to improve sanitation, improve conditions, and I think they worked in almost 40 countries around the world, they just couldn't get any traction with donors, and they were struggling. And then one day, Elena was looking at some information, and she came across the Emojipedia. And the reason she came across this is because she had heard that the poop emoji was one of the most popular emojis in the world today. So not only was it one of the most popular, it was one of the top 2,000 emojis that people use to express emotion to, interestingly, people they love. And she went online to look at this. There's actually an Emojipedia. So an encyclopedia, a Wikipedia for emojis. And she went through this and she looked at some of these different categories, and she thought about her own behavior and the behavior of people around her, particularly those who were of a younger generation who really cared about causes and about the purpose behind why companies do what they do. And she dug into this a little bit. And she said, okay, what if we took this idea of an Emojipedia, or that of the poop emoji that we see is so popular in the Emojipedia, and what if we take this and look at how we can start to use it to our advantage? Because when she spent time researching the poop emoji, what she found is that this was something that people absolutely love. They use it for baby showers. They use it for Valentine's Day. We see it in their soft pillows that you can buy and give to your loved ones. There are happy birthday cakes. There are poop emoji gift baskets. There are emoji hats you can wear. There's ornaments for the holidays. There's coffee cups. So this was clearly something that really, really mattered to people and caught their attention. So people were engaged. And she said, well, what if we looked at this and used this as the inspiration for what we do for our fundraising and for building awareness for building toilets? And so they created a video that told the story from an emoji point of view. Now, when people don't care, we usually say they don't give a, and I'm not going to show the real world word on this webinar, but I'll say they just don't give a poop. And that really was the root of the story that WaterAid was wanting to tell, is that the world has a big problem here. And they wanted to tell this story in a really lighthearted, fun way to get people to pay attention to a subject that they felt was too far away from them or just unpleasant. So they started out with the video that tells the story of what's going on, and then they moved into an app that people can download. Now, with this app, what you do once you download it is that you can create your own poop emoji and you can send it to friends. So here it is on the screen. You can activate your keyboard and text your own emoji to your friends. But I'm sure you can text them to your enemies. But when you look at how this app is designed, what they've done is down here on the left, you can look through, you can browse through the gallery of other emojis that other people have created. Now, look in the middle. That's an opportunity for you to create your own emoji. Now, what they also did here is they connected the opportunity to donate right here in the experience. So that's a key thing, is that they made it really easy, and they connected the ease right next to the fun that goes on with the app. So what they did, if you look at the middle screen, to get started, when you click that create one, you get started and you can start to create your own poop emoji to send to somebody. So then you look over here, you can go through all the different shapes of it. You can select it. You can pick out hair, you can pick out color, you can pick out accessories, you know, you can have it eat pizza, you can have it do all these amazingly different things that you would never think that people cared about with an emoji. But the interesting thing is people cared like crazy about this emoji. And they have this hashtag called give a, not poop, but you know, show that you care. And that means you're sharing the emoji that you created with somebody else, and also at the same time saying, I care about what's happening in the world. And they saw a tremendous amount of engagement with people, because when you look at these emojis, lots of people think they're very fun. And they said, hey, how did you do that, to the person who sent it to them? And then that person shares the WaterAid app, shares the website, and brings people into a bigger experience that they found really fun. Now, when we look at this next slide, here they move people onto their website so they can tell a longer story. So what they say is, these guys give a poop, so you can too. Join today's top creators in celebrating World Toilet Day and supporting WaterAid's effort. So every year there is a day actually called World Toilet Day, and that's when they bring attention to sanitation conditions around the world. And they took this opportunity to kind of hijack the fun of the poop emoji and bring people into it. And now they could see a tremendous amount of engagement, of awareness, of interest in what was going on in the world in ways that they never could have imagined before. So I believe it was from just this campaign itself, they garnered 11,000 new donors to WaterAid. Now, the reason that they were able to do this, they created this tremendously successful social media campaign. And it wasn't just it wasn't just because it was a nonprofit. It's because they tied it to a super relevant conversation piece that had a massive impact across the board for improving these human health conditions. Now, they were very smart in understanding, okay, what matters to this audience, what matters to donors, how can we take the idea of what's going on with the emoji and even expand our donor base. That was huge for them, to be able to bring new donors and attention to the work that they were trying to do. Now, what WaterAid did is that they understood the third part of being able to come up with really great ideas. And that's relating what you've observed and you've distilled, taking that and relating that into your brand, because that's what gives credibility to outside inspiration for when you come to pitch your project or your new idea. So when we look at this, what we see is that the most successful people in the world all follow the same process for coming up with great ideas, getting them to stick and to pitch them. And the thing is, a lot of times they don't even realize that they're following the same process. So if we go back to our examples that we've talked about here, is what they do is they start out by observing the world around them, just like Lauren did. And then they say, okay, now that I see what's going on with the world around me, how do I distill that into something that has a broader message, something that has a common theme there? And then what they do is they then relate it into their brand in a way that makes sense to what they're trying to accomplish, or the work that they're doing, or anything that they want to achieve. And it's only then that they start to generate ideas, and then they pitch them. Because the key here is that you have to make sure that you take what you've observed and you distill it and you relate it into the work that you do. Because if you don't, you're not creating a story format. Now, when we go back to that earlier slide, when we're talking about observe and generate and pitch, and then also the one where we need to flip the order of how we talk about proof and plot meaning story, when we go through the same process that we use to come up with a really, really great idea, what we need to do when we pitch our idea is that we need to tell the story of the idea in the same order of how we came up with it. So we say something like, I was thinking about how we need to bring more attention to our men's health program. And the other day I observed that it was Movember. And I thought about how much people really get on board with the Movember theme, and they grow their long mustaches. And so that's what they observed. Okay, then the next step is you say, then I realized when I distilled that, what I saw is that people were creating something that they could share and become a part of. Now, when I think about how we can do that at our medical center, how about if we create a contest where people can submit their own selfie and they can share it, they can talk about it, and then it gets them engaged, it gets the people around them engaged. So there they've generated the idea, they've pitched it, and most importantly, they've told a story that brings people along the journey of the idea. And when people follow this process, what we see is that they end up with exponential outcomes, with outcomes that were so much bigger than they ever could have imagined when they first started down this path. Now, I want you to remember, by going through this process, you'll see that successful pitches don't come from divine inspiration. They come because they're refined over time. So many times we discount our ability to come up with great ideas and to do it on a moment's notice and to get them to stick, because we think that there's a specific personality trait that just naturally is good with this. But the truth is, it comes because you use this practice, and over time you get better and better and better at it. And that's how you're able to come up with a great idea at just a moment's notice and get people to support it and buy into it, because that's what makes it stick. So that's really what I want you to remember about as you look into 2019. and with what's ahead and what you're planning for, because I hope you're planning for some really big things. Because with all of this, I know I gave several examples that are digital, but what I want you to remember is that there is such a tremendous amount of reasons and ways that you have to connect the print and the online world. Because when we only look at digital, what we're missing is an opportunity to create something that's really tangible, that people can take and feel and touch, and that creates such a strong emotional connection. And we also think, you know, sooner or later in most industries, we're going to have that offline relationship. And so we have to look at what that looks like overall and how we really do it in a way that tells the story in a cohesive way, not just only offline and not just only digitally. We really have to look at how this all marries together, because that's how we look at success at the end of the day. So thank you so much, Tiffany, for having me, and I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thanks, Carla. So those examples, I mean, they were awesome, and I think I'm already thinking of different ways that I can implement them into my planning process. But before we jump into some additional questions, let's take a minute to go over some ways that you can take all of your great ideas and put them into action. You've likely heard the saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Well, to ensure that your big idea gets off the ground, start with some big picture planning to reach your end goal. One tried and true way to do this is something that most of us probably have plenty of at our desks, and those are sticky notes. You can use them for brainstorming, collaboration with others, creating a timeline, task listing and prioritization, and much more. And after you've done this, you can take a step back, look at the plan as a whole. You may discover that some items need to shift or be removed entirely, but the right things to do will surface now that you have this plan in place. And this method not only allows you to download all of your thoughts into one space, but it also serves as a way to organize and organize again throughout the entire process. And Allegra can be your partner throughout that planning process, all the way through execution. We've got the right brain covered with our creative experience, and the left brain covered with the tactics and the data to back them up. Those primary objectives that we talked about earlier are really the core of how Allegra approaches issues and provides solutions. Not only can we be there during the strategic planning process, but we're a local single source that can execute on all different tactics that are a part of your plan, whether it be printed materials, direct mail, graphic design, trade show displays, a multi-channel mailing campaign, and more. Bringing us along throughout the planning can ensure that this big idea paves the way for more. So we did get a few questions throughout. I'm going to go ahead and start with those, Carla. So the first question we got was, how do we channel more ideation and better ideation of 20-somethings without discouraging creative thinking?
Oh, you know, I love that question, because I am teaching a marketing class to a group of 16 students who are, I'd say, 28 and younger. And that's the thing, is that they have so much energy and creative ideas, and you're sitting here going, oh my goodness, I can't believe I have to deal with this every day. But the biggest thing, and this is really a responsibility for supervisors, for managers, for team leaders, is that you have to be able to take that enthusiasm and the craziness of the ideas and channel it in a direction that works best for your business and your team. And the way I teach supervisors and managers to do this is that you have to really look at how are you giving feedback back to the people who are coming to you with ideas. So we have a tendency to do what I call the gladiator effect. And if you remember back to Roman history and the gladiators, it was the thumbs up or thumbs down that determined whether or not somebody would live. And we tend to do that with ideas as well, you know, especially with the 20-somethings. They come in, hey, here's an idea, what do you think? It either gets a thumbs up or a thumbs down. You know, the idea lives or it dies. So what we have to do, and this is really a big responsibility and accountability that we need to take on as leaders of younger employees, is to look at how do we give them feedback that makes it helpful and helps them grow the ideas so they become more mature in idea creators. So I tell people to give feedback in two ways. The first statement that you say is, here's what I like about this. Because let's face it, when you're young in your career, sometimes it just takes a lot of courage to come forward and share an idea. So even if that's the only good that you can see in an idea, that's where you start. Here's what I like, but I'm sure there's going to be other things that you like about the idea. So point those out specifically, because this is what fuels that courage for the young people to continue to dig into ideas and to continue to bring them forward to you. Now, the next statement that I always say is that I want you to tell them, here's what I wish. So this is a much more productive and helpful way to tell anybody, not just the 20-year-olds, tell anybody how to iterate an idea instead of saying, here's what I don't like, because that's very critical and it can kill the incentive to move that idea forward. So here's what I wish. What this also forces you to do as the person who's giving feedback to the 20-something or whoever it is that you have to start to look into your own needs and say, this is what I wish, because what I'm realizing is that there's some other things we need to deal with that I didn't realize. Maybe you have to make sure that it fits within a specific budget. So what I liked was the great idea and how it could be executed, but what I wish is that we could do this on a budget of $15,000 instead of $50,000. So these are the things that you give to people that help them feel confident and courageous about continuing to come back with great ideas, but also give them specific things that they can go back and work on and make that idea better.
All right, thank you. And the next one we got was, how long does this idea generation process typically take to get through the 5 steps? Is it something that can be done quickly, or is it generally a longer process?
For some teams, they go through this very thoughtfully and very strategically. They start out with an objective that they want to deal with in, either in their team or with their business overall. And, they may take all day or maybe a couple of days to go through it and vet the ideas, or maybe even a couple of weeks. But for a lot of people, once you get into this habit, you'll see that you can go through this process in a matter of minutes. So somebody will come to you and say, we need some new ideas for a campaign to kick off 2019. And because you've honed your skill, because you've practiced just looking at the world around you and watching and paying attention, and then distilling that into broader meanings, and then, relating that into the work that you do. Now, it doesn't have to mean professional work. Maybe it's something that you do as an artist, as a cook, as a volunteer for an organization, that you're able to generate the ideas. So the more you practice, the faster these ideas come. And I swear, I have seen people go through this process really in a matter of seconds and be able to generate a slew of amazing ideas in just a small amount of time. So when you think about the people who who are the most creative or the most innovative thinkers, and they can just come up with ideas in a heartbeat like that, it's because whether they realize it or not, they have consciously, or they've practiced this process so often that it just becomes an absolute automatic habit.
All right. So we've got one that says, I'm not an Amazon or an Arby's, and my social presence, there isn't much of one. So how can I adapt some of these examples today that were really very much social campaigns to other channels?
And that's the fun part is, you see some of these things in social and you think, of course, that works in social. But really, even if you were working in print, if you're looking at just ideas in general, if you follow the process about observing something that worked, maybe you're observing something that worked in social, like with what the medical center did. Okay, look at the details of what they did, and then look at the essence. What patterns are you seeing behind what made it successful? So it would be things like making this more of success by building a community. Maybe it's by creating an experience that people can become a part of. Maybe it's the word of mouth part of it. So those are the things that you've distilled. Now when you go to relate that into your brand, you can ask yourself, how do I start to think about things in a way that creates a bigger community for the people I want to connect with? How do I create more things that will inspire word of mouth conversations? So that's how you relate it into your brand, and then you use that as the foundation for generating ideas. So now if you're looking at this from the perspective of how do I create more things that are word of mouth marketing, and you say, now I want to do a big mailer that, you know, folds out into all different kind of shapes and might have a transformer kind of theme. Now it doesn't seem so crazy because you've started with something that you can see clearly was successful, and you tell the story of how that connects into your own brand and the own idea that you have for something new that you want to do for, you know, maybe 2019.
Okay, and what are some ways to spark the observing process when we're feeling tunnel visioned?
Oh, you know, this is one of my favorite things to do because I'm a big people watcher, and I will just go to the mall or go to a coffee shop or someplace like that. And this is key, I always put my phone away. Maybe I leave it in the car, or, you know, leave it back at the office or something like that. I turn it off because I don't want that distraction. And I'll just sit there with a little notebook or a piece of paper, and I just watch people. And something really unusual starts to happen when you do that, is that the more you just sit and watch people, the more your mind will observe and see. And you may see when you first sit down, you know, the first 5 or 10 minutes, your mind will keep going back to that to-do list, to all the email you have to get back to the project you have due, or something you have to give to your boss this afternoon, or whatever. There's always a million things to keep pulling your attention away. But if you say, I'm just going to do this for 30 minutes, and go to some place that's completely different from where you work, you know, maybe it's an art museum, maybe it's a park, you know, some place that gives you a completely different physical space, a mental space, an emotional space, and just start to write literally lists of things you observe. Because you'll see things such as, first you see a trash can, then you see an overflowing trash can. Then you watch people go by and they sort of throw the trash in that direction, but they don't really care if it goes in there. Then you see trash on the, you know, in the park, on the floor, and you start to notice these things. And then when you go back through all of your list of the things that you have observed, you'll start to see patterns in it. And maybe one of the patterns is, you know, trash, or ugly things, or smelly things, or maybe it's beautiful things, or welcoming things, or, you know, access or communication. Then that's how you start to relate it then into your company and say, how do we give people better access to what we want them to have as customers? Or how do we better communicate some of the things that we want to make sure that customers know? But I think this idea of observing, especially in our always-on digital world, to take it out of that and really go into, you know, a tangible, touchable, paper-based world is an experience that really heightens our senses. And that's what we want to do when we observe.
Okay, we just have a couple more left then. So would you recommend that the ideation is done as an individual or more as like a brainstorming team?
You know, I've seen different research that works both ways, but one of the strongest that I've seen is that if you talk the idea through, the challenge through first as a group, and then give people the opportunity to go away and work on it themselves. Because when you do that, you avoid one thing that is a detriment to group thinking, to groups thinking, and that actually is group thinking, that people don't want to create dissonance in a group by disagreeing with somebody else or showing a different opinion. And so what happens is that strong opinionated people, strong personality people will tend to rule and run the direction of where an idea is going. And, you know, there's a lot of introverts in the world, and how they process information and how they come up with ideas is that they need time to go back and be by themselves and be thoughtful and be reflective. So there's strengths in both, but I want to make sure that people understand that ability to get time away and time alone and probably do some observations by themselves is a really important part of coming up with good ideas.
All right, and then this last one we have is, how do you get your manager to greenlight an idea that is new or hasn't been done before and you really don't have any examples or numbers to back it up?
You know, that goes back to how you use this process. And if you can start with the story that inspired you to try something that was successful in another industry, in something else completely, you know, that's a great way to start, because then you connect the dots and show why and how it relates to your own situation. And then people are more willing to say, maybe they don't give you the green light for everything all at once, but maybe what they do is they say, okay, you know, what I like about this is the uniqueness of it. And what I wish is that there was a way to have a greater sense that this would work. So maybe you get approval in a small budget to go try it out on a small level, you know, so you do a little trial and error. And then as you learn and it grows through success, then you can grow the budget that you put behind it.
All right, thank you. We also did get a question about if the slide deck will be available after the webinar, and all registrants will receive an email with the link to both the slide deck and the recording by early next week. So yes, you will have access to that. We really want to just thank all of you for joining us today. I mean, we know your next big idea is well within your reach, but if you need help, be sure to contact your local expert at Allegra. And if you aren't already working with us, you can find your nearest partner by visiting allegramarketingprint.com. Thank you again, Carla, and we hope everybody has a wonderful day.